Today's special guest is the creator of many empowering and insightful articles published at unlimitedhangout.com, including the January 23rd, 2020 article on DARPA that I found so prescient back then. More recently, she's world renowned for her epic 2-volume series, One Nation Under Blackmail, which is becoming more transparent to the world every day. Her latest article is First Friends, How Italy's Donald Trump Introduced Naomi Campbell to Jeffrey Epstein. I'm very pleased and excited to welcome back to Grand Theft World Podcast, Whitney Webb. Whitney, how you doing?
Hey, I'm doing great. Thanks for having me.
Well,
I'm very happy to be back.
Yeah, thanks for making time in your schedule. I have had to watch you with Sabby Sabs recently to get a taste of what's going on out there. She's very savvy, that savvy. All right, so my first question for you, it's not going to be a curveball. It's more of a softball, okay?
Okay.
I teach people marketing and entrepreneurism, I'm just curious, when did you decide to hire Ian Carroll as your director of marketing?
Oh my God. Okay, so I don't even know what to say to that. Oh my God. Okay,
right.
so I didn't hire Ian at all, and I haven't really had any contact with him ever. But I do appreciate that he has enjoyed my book thoroughly. But I do not agree with some of the conclusions he's had from it. So I would say, for example, that I would disagree with the conclusion that my book says only Epstein was Mossad. So I argue in the book that Epstein was Israeli military intelligence, which is an important distinction because Israel can come out and say, we deny 100% that Epstein was Mossad, but if you need to get the right agency because then it's not as easy for them, right? You have to anticipate smears and attacks like that and when you're dealing with this kind of information. But beyond that, I also argue for a U.S. intelligence tie, which, saying Epstein was Mossad kind of glosses over that. But more importantly, I would argue than either of those things is the fact that my book really argues, and this is why Volume 1 even exists, that what we're dealing with here is not really even state agencies. It's the power structure above them. It's a transnational oligarchy that represents the union between the people that created the intelligence agencies, mostly bankers, right, and Wall Street lawyers, with organized crime and how that continues to manifest and inform the oligarchy of today and our reality and our power structures. And so ultimately the book is very anti-duopoly. I go after both parties and, unfortunately my feeling is that Ian promoted my work, which, obviously it's nice when people promote your work, but I kind of felt like he was sheep herding people in a way towards Trump, which I don't think my book really supports, considering that it talks a lot about Trump's mentor, Roy Cohn. There's plenty in the book that isn't favorable for Trump. And I learned, of course, after the book was published, some more stuff about Trump that I hope to put in an upcoming second edition of One Nation Under Blackmail, like that he became the controlling shareholder of Resorts International, which was formerly Mary Carter Paint Company, very notorious mob-linked, CIA-linked company. That's the same year he took over, or he bought Adnan Khashoggi's yacht, which I note in the book had been used for blackmail purposes by Khashoggi, who, of course, in that time also had ties to Epstein. That Roy Cohn, Trump's mentor, basically not ran, but was intimately involved with, sexual blackmail activities at the Plaza Hotel, which after Cohn dies, Trump also buys. And there's allegations of similar-ish things, though slightly different, happening at the Plaza Hotel in that period. And of course, Trump is hanging out, as noted in the book, on Robert Maxwell's yacht in the late 1980s or so around a host of other figures who were controversial, like the Senator John Tower, who was an accomplice to Robert Maxwell on the Promise software scandal, Steve Ross, who created what is now, I guess, Time Warner out of an organized crime-linked, front company that was operating some sort of garage, I believe, that he took over. And I forget who else is in the picture. Oh, Mike Wallace, Chris Wallace's father, the well-known journalist of that era, all in the same picture. Of course, a few years after that, Trump is bailed out by the Rothschild banking interests. Wilbur Ross was assisting that. and you know, Robert Maxwell's own entry into the U.S., New York City in particular, was prompted by his affiliation with the Rothschild Bank that was opened in the 1980s on Wall Street that was aiming to do mergers and acquisitions. And they picked three people. I forget the third guy, but he was a friend of Maxwell's. But the two other guys were Jimmy Goldsmith, a famous corporate raider of the era and who's related to the Rothschilds.
Nice.
And then Robert Maxwell. And of course, Maxwell and Goldsmith, as I note in the book, have, you know, were in the same social circles going back to this entity called the Claremont Club, which was linked to British intelligence and organized crime and also sex blackmail activities, and included some of these figures that are not, I don't think Maxwell's portrayed in it, but I know Goldsmith and some of these other people like Tiny Roland are in Adam Curtis's documentary series, The Mayfair Set. Which is recommended viewing if you'd like to know that these people are rather worthy of scrutiny. And it's worth pointing out, too, that, you know, involving Epstein overlap, the earliest interaction with Epstein in this network I could find, and as I note in the book, too, was in the early 1970s, where Epstein was inexplicably appearing at Jimmy Goldsmith's mansion when he wasn't even hired by the Dalton School yet. He was still a college dropout.
Was that before or after your first volume documents that he met with the Queen of England?
No, it wasn't the Queen of England. He got involved with the royal violinist, Jacqueline Dupree, and allegedly had connections with the royal family through her, but we don't know which members necessarily. But he somehow got very close and allegedly accompanied her on piano for performances. That's alleged.
Well, he has an interest in music. But your part about Jimmy Goldsmith, that's also Adam Curtis documentary. It might also be the Mayfair Set where they talk about him pretty prolifically. So if anyone's not aware of those characters, they are quintessential because Epstein did not act alone in any of this stuff.
Yeah, but this is after his trip to England when he was a college dropout backpacking through Europe and somehow ends up musically accompanying some very well-connected musician who Dupree, by the way, ended up marrying some Israeli, I forget, but he was friends. He was an Israeli, I think, musician, might have been a dancer. I can't remember because it's been a few years. But that's apparently how Itzhak Perlman, the famous musician, got connected with Epstein, was through that relationship. And then Epstein, when he had his cabin at the Interlaken camp, was basically supposedly had built that cabin for Itzhak Perlman's use. And now Itzhak Perlman's son is like running a major, he's like a top executive at a major crypto exchange. I think it's Binance. And was previously at Gemini and is doing, you know, not strange things, but working for companies that I think are rather suspect personally.
All right. So
stuff.
All right. So I got a good memory. Let's go from the top. The Ian Carroll piece. I'm sure Carroll Quigley wouldn't agree with everything I say about his book, right? So I was just joking that he was your marketing director. It's just that he got out there and got in front of so many people, and Epstein became the topic. And then he's using your book as reference. And I was like, did he even read the book? When did he read the book? Where'd he come from? And he's an interesting character. So would you be up to like meeting him or talking with him or doing an interview with him in the future? Or, you know, either way, he asks you, you ask him? Find out.
I mean, I don't know. I'd have to think about it. I mean, I have a really big interview backlog.
Yeah, that is true. That is true.
Yeah, it's true. I've been kind of out of the spotlight for a while. I mean, I appreciate that he promoted it, and I don't want to cast
yeah, you got
shade on
mentioned
anybody.
you got mentioned in Joe Rogan, right? Your name was said on the show.
I just, you know, I really hope what people take away from my work is pointing out that it's a transnational oligarchy. At the end of the day, it's, you know, who do the state actors really work for? You know, at the end of the day, like if Epstein was Israeli affiliated, what does that mean? Who's controlling the state of Israel?
Well, and your point was
who's controlling the United States?
Amen, which is military intelligence it's the Directorate for Israel for military intelligence. So Ari Ben Manash and some other people, look, I have Epstein under that. I don't have him under Mossad. So I think I would concur with you on that because I've never seen, like, he could be an asset adjacently, but like that's a
Yeah, but I
big
had that there.
that's a
Yeah, I
big
haven't
setup.
seen.
That house that Wexner, like I think Wexner was a front also, and that's why he passes it over. He's like, dude, I'm retiring. I'm gonna sit back and be off the hook. You're on the hook now. And then likely Epstein got his like I think he blackmailed Donald Barr to get his start. Got a position at the Dalton School. Barr leaves. He goes and finds Ace Greenberg's kid, finds some stuff about that guy. All of a sudden, he's a guy on the Bear Stearns board of directors. He's like untouchable. So
Well,
like
it's hard to
maybe
know.
it
It's hard to
increased.
know why
Yeah,
and
right.
how it happened, but
Yeah.
definitely it's not a normal trajectory. I think it's also possible too that Epstein was known to have been really talented in math and also music. Why he was a teen and high schooler. That's how he got a full scholarship to attend the Interlochen School when he was a teenager, for example. And it's very possible. So Donald Barr was also running in New York at the time that Epstein was in high school, one of these talented teen programs where they kind of they identify people who are talented and sort of pluck them out of high school and put them in special programs or whatever. And in other parts of the world, like Israel, for example, they have the Talpiot program where they pick kids out of high school that are talented in math and science to put them on a fast track to high up positions in Unit 8200 and things like that. It's very possible that something like that happened there, considering that Donald Barr historically had ties to intelligence through his service in the OSS. And at the time he hired Epstein at the Dalton School, his son, William Barr, who we can talk about again later for obvious reasons, was working for the CIA and was involved then in stonewalling the Church Committee of Congress about, the information they were looking for from the CIA. He was part of that effort to prevent the release of more information than absolutely necessary from the CIA to Congress, right? So there's possible that there was something else there and that he was helped along that way and through connections. Ace Greenberg, it was a kind of, shady guy in some ways in and of themselves. A lot of these figures that I talk about in the book connected to Epstein, for example, are part of secret societies like B'nai B'rith, which is basically the Jewish equivalent of Freemasonry. So do they have, these little clubs and they're, backroom handshakes and I'm going to hire you for this and that, that kind of stuff is known to have happened in U.S. history on more than one occasion, right? So it's possible that Epstein's rise was related to that, because also Greenberg, after Epstein was at Bear Stearns, kind of took him under his wing and helped him climb up through the bank very quickly. He left in 1980, but before then he was advising the most elite clients of Bear Stearns on tax evasion type stuff. The reason he was let go is allegedly because he was being questioned as part of this SEC investigation into insider trading involving the Bronfman family. So if Epstein were to have, the SEC was tipped off that Epstein knew something about it. Bronfman very well could have been a client of Bear Stearns at that time. But what's interesting too is that the legal counsel for Bear Stearns right around the time all of this was happening was actually Bill Casey, who just like a month or two later becomes CIA director for Reagan.
Didn't he die in a canoe accident?
No, that was William Colby.
Colby. I always get him mixed up.
No, Bill Casey died. I forget of what, but it was after either right after or while the Iran-Contra hearings were going on.
Fascinating. Now, when you were talking about OSS creating companies, OSS and CIA also created AIG, which is a different Greenberg. That's Hank Greenberg, no relation to Ace Greenberg, so far as I can tell. But that's also all Anglo-American Israeli establishment as well.
Yeah, and Hank Greenberg is a longtime top funder of the CFR, right? And Epstein was also a major funder for a time of the CFR. And even after he was arrested in 07, 08, they didn't they continued to take his money for a few years after that. And, as Hillary Clinton herself said, the CFR is the mothership, right?
Yes.
So
glad they have an outlet now in DC so they don't have to go to New York to get their marching orders, I think was the rest of that quote. All right. So
yeah.
Epstein Bronfman. Bronfman is Yiddish for liquor man. Bronfmans are throughout your book because it's a gangster cartel type thing. It's international. And is like a corporate front for the Jewish mafia traditionally. Because your volume 1 starts in like 1942 with Operation Underworld, and this was going on prior to that because of Prohibition. and Canadian smuggling into America. Can you go into the history of Bronfman and Epstein? Why would they be connected?
Yeah, so my thesis about Epstein in general is that he was working, obviously most overtly for Leslie Wexner, but Leslie Wexner himself is enmeshed with this group that becomes rather tight knit later of oligarchs, really these billionaires that all happen to have organized crime connections and are very interested in ethno philanthropy, I guess
Are you
I would
speaking of the
call it.
mega group?
Yeah, sure. And yeah, which Bronfman Charles Bronfman, not Edgar Bronfman, but they obviously work closely together since they're brothers. Co-founded that with Leslie Wexner in 91, but it wasn't reported on until the Wall Street Journal covered it, I think in 1998 or
So it was
1997,
before
somewhere.
Robert Maxwell's death, but his code name was Mega. And then he dies in between those 2 points that you just talked about, doesn't he? Falls off his boat.
He dies in 1991, but I'm not sure because we
Oh.
don't know the month the mega group was created, but it was created sometime in 91, so it's hard to know the exact overlap. But there was a spy scandal in DC, and the code name it was wiretap. It was a wiretap or something, I believe, of the Israeli embassy, and they were talking about getting information from someone whose code name was Mega. But and so they were trying to look for like a mole in the government, and they didn't find one. And then their source. I think it was the Washington Post or some mainstream media outlet like that was reporting on it, and the Israeli they interviewed to sort of like explain away the scandal was Rafi Eitan, who had actually been Robert Maxwell's handler, and also Jonathan Pollard's handler
Oh, wow.
for Israeli intelligence. But he was running a now defunct Israeli intelligence agency called Lakim that was mainly focused on science and technology espionage. And I forget exactly when it was shut down, but basically he was the one kind of trying to explain it away. And it's very interesting you would roll out such a controversial figure to be the person to explain it away. And I think if you look at Rafi Eitan's career of espionage against the United States alone, you can't really take his claims at face value at all. So the possibility, and I think it was first raised by Israel Shamir, writing for Executive Intelligence Review in like 2002, that the Mega Group and Mega were linked somehow, and positing that Mega was a code word for these billionaires, which is possible considering that they have these links to organized crime. That specifically this syndicate that teamed up with U.S. intelligence, and how a lot of them have bankrolled prominent politicians. So as an example, the Crown family were members of the Mega Group with Wexner and the Bronfmans, and the Crowns are also linked to organized crime, but they're out of Chicago. And they built up, for example, what is now General Dynamics, a military contractor, but also along with Wexner banking interests, created the modern day JP Morgan and put Jamie Dimon in charge of it. Of course, JP Morgan later gets involved in facilitating Epstein banking criminality. But the Crowns were also one of the forces that led to Barack Obama's early political career, right?
Yeah, it's fascinating the
doesn't get
origins of
talked
that
about a
man's
lot.
career. Well, he got
Yeah.
called treasonous this week. That's new for him.
Well, I think that's only really coming out to distract from how they're not releasing the Epstein files and how do
Oh,
we
you
make
noticed that too?
Oh, yes, I did. And how now Ghislaine Maxwell, who doesn't want to die like her father or like Epstein or like Jean-Luc Brunel, is being questioned by the DOJ and may testify and say certain things.
But just
I
the
think
Pam Bondi, who allegedly has a consulting relationship with Susie Wiles, and Susie Wiles allegedly had some sort of like running Netanyahu's campaign. I mean, these are things I heard from Tim Dillon, so I can't take them seriously because he's a comedian. So I don't know about any of that. But this is a comedy show sometimes too.
well, I'm not familiar with those allegations necessarily, but I think if you're Ghislaine Maxwell and a lot of people around you have been killed off, and you're in prison, I think she'll do anything to negotiate her release or a reduced sentence and say anything to further that and also not die. So we'll see what she says. But if I have to pick anything, that I think she may say, if it's not something made up, which is possible, but if she tells the truth about something, she'll just be asked ad nauseum about the Clintons and like Bill Gates and people like that, but not about anything that could be damaging for the modern day Republican Party. Right. And as you know, my work tries to make very clear, you know, the rot is definitely 100% bipartisan. But the big giveaway here, because I saw a headline about how Hillary and Bill Clinton are going to be subpoenaed about their relationship with Ghislaine Maxwell now, as they're trying to distract away about how they're not going to release the files, which obviously have something bad for both parties in them. Otherwise, we would probably have them. But the big giveaway here about that, if the Clintons are subpoenaed and forced to testify or whatever, or if Ghislaine is asked about them, is that Republicans are not going to touch one very important aspect of the Epstein-Clinton relationship with a 10-foot pole, and that is Jeffrey Epstein's 17 visits to the Clinton White House between 1993 and 1995. They will not touch that. And there is a reason why mainstream media has worked so hard to have all the scandalous coverage of Epstein and Clinton be after Clinton left office. No focus on before when he was in office. And the same is true also, I've argued in the past about Bill Gates, because they won't talk about his relationship with Epstein until he was no longer involved as chairman of Microsoft. So they want the pressure off of Microsoft. They want the pressure off of what was Epstein doing at the Clinton White House, because it's really, I would argue, ultimately boils down to what I see as sort of the second coming of Iran-Contra in the mid-90s, same network, involved with this very crazy effort that's remembered as Chinagate today, but it really has a lot to do with U.S. and Israeli intelligence, who, of course, were the bedfellows of Iran-Contra, and some of the connections they made to major Chinese weapons dealers and organized crime-like figures in Macau, and you know, weird things there that involved a lot of military technology transfer from the U.S. to China. Israel very involved in this, and it was even, you know, the CIA like acknowledged that in the early 90s. But nothing was done to really stop anything. And they don't really want to talk about that at all. Even though it involves China, it involves Clinton. You think it would be the perfect story for Trump, but no, they won't touch it. And I write a lot about it very extensively in my book, Chinagate, if you'd like more detail on why that would be so bad for both parties.
What about the Clinton Global Initiative and Epstein's connections to that? Is that something that would be off limits, or do you think they might get into that?
Yeah, they might do that, but so Epstein was alleged to have created the Clinton Global Initiative or been part of a group that came up with the idea for it. Because, I mean, mainstream media will talk about Epstein's connection to Clinton philanthropy, because obviously that's post-presidency when all of that happens. And of course, the Clinton Global has connections also with Terramar, trying to get that promoted and what have you. But also, as I'll be noting in the second part of my current series, someone who's very close to Trump and very affiliated and is part of the current administration also had a major involvement with Terramar and the UN stuff and this weird economic passport scheme involving Chinagate people. And all sorts of very weird things. And his wife was on the flight logs while underage, among other things. So again, you don't want to go too into certain things, because as is the case with many things in the Epstein scandal, if you pull on a thread too far, it unravels and shows that this is a bipartisan issue and that we're run by corrupt oligarchs and their flunkies. And, I think for a long time, the way they've tried, the powers that be have tried to manage the fallout from Epstein is depending on what partisan box you are in. You will either talk about Trump and Epstein, or you will talk about Clinton and Epstein. And not enough people talk about both or try and understand what's really going on with the whole scandal and trying to figure out what it really teaches us and shows. Because Epstein, as I've noted before, really is it comes down to middle management. He's managing portfolios for powerful people. He was doing that in the 80s and late 70s at Bear Stearns, and then he was doing that for Leslie Wexner, and a lot of these other people that he became involved with, including, you know, doing financial stuff for Netanyahu, having connections to Ehud Barak. A lot of these don't, like the Netanyahu tie, like never gets covered. Only Ehud Barak, and actually Netanyahu used it as a lot of, you know, political attacks against Barak. And I think the last election where Barak was at one point a contender.
Wasn't Ehud Barak among the people who attended Robert Maxwell's state funeral in Israel?
Yeah, I
Pretty sure.
believe so. Lots of important people attended it. Well, you know, Robert Maxwell had a role in Iran-Contra, who in that capacity was working for Israeli military intelligence. And during Iran-Contra, the head of Israeli military intelligence, head of Amman, was Ehud Barak.
I have Robert Maxwell as working for Amman too, not Mossad, and he sold the software Promise with the back door in it.
He did.
He got that all through the Justice Department on behalf of another nation state or two that would benefit from seeing into it. So it's like the Anglo-American Israeli establishment. Two of those parties might not be our allies and have been working together for like the last century. And a lot of this can't be mentioned because it's the third rail topic, which is what your 2 volumes are all about, the third rail topic. You could have another website just for third rail isms. Where you're like, here's the thread. If you guys want to pull on it, not a lot of reward, but you could pull on it.
Well, there isn't a lot of reward for it. And I think it's interesting that right now, there's a lot of efforts, I think, to manage the discussion about the Epstein scandal. A lot of people that have been rolled out in high profile interviews weren't interviewed about Epstein before now.
You notice that too, huh?
Yeah, people like Mike Benz, who previously was, you know, had an online alter ego named Frame Game, where he was trying to, I guess, allegedly saying anti-Semitic things and other things to fight anti-Semitism covertly or something. It's a strange phenomenon. People should look into it. And then he also worked for the State Department under Trump, which is interesting. And then Sagar Enjeti, former, for several years, fellow at the Hudson Institute. Other fellows include Nikki Haley, William Barr, Mike Pompeo, you know, some well-connected figures. It's interesting. You know, and then Daryl Cooper is on Tucker and tries to attribute my book to someone else who has never written a book. It's very strange. But you know, I think a lot of the people that are being promoted don't really talk about the bipartisan nature, leave certain things out. A lot of them, if they're in arguing about the intelligence ties, are trying to keep it just Epstein and Israel, or trying to keep it like in a very specific box. And, you know, my book has come up in some of these discussions, but it's kind of frustrating to me because I feel like a lot of people that have brought it up aren't reading it, because it's very clear that this is a transnational issue that has developed, you know, from the 40s, arguably a little bit earlier, on. And what I'm trying to get people to focus on is that this is not a power structure we can vote our way out of. And that, you know, Trump, Clinton, Epstein, you know, they have a lot of the same people pulling their strings at the end of the day.
They go to a lot
Obama
of the same
too,
Christmas
as I
parties.
mentioned earlier. Yeah. Yeah. So, you know, we're not going to vote our way out of the problems we're having. And if people don't realize that it's oligarchs really running everything and that this is a us versus them thing, we are going to get pushed into this insane technocratic society that is being built for us by people that hung out with Jeffrey Epstein, like Peter Thiel. And really, Palantir does what Epstein used to do. I argue this at the end of the book. Because in the past, you know, sex blackmailing was necessary, but now it's not, because they can find out everything about you from your online life and activities, sucking all the data up about you that has been put on the internet or through your phone or whatever. And Palantir collates all of that on behalf of all 18 U.S. intelligence agencies. And it's problematic, among other things. And I've been rambling for a while, so I'll pause there.
It is problematic, and it's unique in history that people who notice such things can have like books out and be able to have these discussions. I mean, you know, it's still pretty much a free world because we can say the words and they didn't come in and jackboot us yet. but there's definitely been an inclination over the past, since 9/11 of taking away our rights, censoring people, getting rid of inconvenient narratives so that they can have like more of a Big Brother 1984 Brave New World type of technocracy. Now, before we talk about your book, your new article, I brought a book for you. I want to see if you've ever seen or heard. No, not this book. There you go.
Yeah.
That's a fact. But this is
Jabotinsky. I've been meaning
No,
to do
no,
a work
this
on
is-
him,
that
a
was-
piece on
that-
him for some time. Oh, okay, sorry.
Okay. So Jabotinsky, I want to hear more about that. But this is a book this is art by Mark Lombardi. He was a conceptual artist about 20 years ago. He sadly died on 3/22/2000, right before 9/11. This cover art here, let's see if I push this button, goes on the front and back. And so it's an entity relationship diagram with the Bush family, James R. Bath, Osama bin Laden.
And the Saudis, I see all the Gaith Farron. Yeah, great.
So he used to do what you do, but instead of writing articles, he made all this art. Now here's the kicker for
Well,
you.
we're looking at Unlimited Hangout. We just hired a graphic designer to make that stuff. So
Okay, good.
hopefully we'll be having
Somebody's got
more of
to.
that.
But I wanted to show you the kicker here. If you go in here, exhibition funders, the Judith Rothschild Foundation. So he's
Oh, wow.
tracking them and they're giving him gallery space, or in this case, posthumously publishing his book. So I just wanted to show you, like, he's not as well known as you are, but if you went through his art, you would see all the names that you see in your articles. And so, it's like the site has been excavated before a little bit, not in the Epstein realm, but just in the Anglo-Israeli American establishment, narco-terrorism
Yeah.
realm, right? And
Yeah.
so this type of raw material out there is important, whether it's written form like your articles where people have to read, or conceptual where it's on a wall and you have to go look at it, right? If it weren't for people like you dedicating so much time to figuring out what is actually going on, everybody would be lost. It's like you're developing a compass for people and giving that to them and says, hey, this is a compass without a magnet beside it. This is what it looks like. And they're like, no, we prefer the magnet next to our compass. It makes us feel more comfortable. And so really you're red pilling people on one level, but you're also giving them like life-giving information, because if they keep participating in these infrastructures and then find out later in life that they've climbed all the way up the ladder, but they're standing against the wrong wall, you're preventing regret for people in the future. So like, that's an honorable task. And like I said, I know it's like what we do is not a rewarding type of thing for, the world's like, fund any noise against our signal. Right.
Sure.
So I just wanted to recognize your bravery, your intrepidness, your tenacity, all these good things, because that's
thank
kind of
you.
like what keeps us going.
Yeah, well,
right.
personally for me, I just think it's important to let people, I also like the research I do. It's like I don't know, so much online is just like slop, like AI slop now. And I feel like there's a lack of original reporting, and I like researching. So I feel really lucky to be able to do this. But also, like, when you're a parent and like where this is going, and like in our lifetimes as adults, what we are likely to experience in the next few years, like you want to fight for a better world for the little people, and you have to inform other people. Like, this isn't something just one of us can fight alone. And it's very important, I think, that I try and use my, platform or interviews or whatever to urge people to develop something parallel to what the oligarchs have done. So if we spend all our time and energy and activism and all of that on electoral politics, on this circus clown show, we're not spending any time building a parallel economic structure or something that will give us resilience at the local level. Because if anything, there's lots of things that get repeated in cycles, right? Ever since these oligarchs have been in charge. And one of those things is wealth transfers. They happen every so often. There's a crisis that they engineer and create. And then the government response is to take regular people's money. And that is likely to happen again, especially now that the Stablecoin Act has passed Congress. We are going to get a digital dollar. You may think stable coins are better than a CBDC, but they are just as bad. Especially if what you're worried about with the CBDC is programmability, surveillability, seizability. You know, do you think JP Morgan is not going to censor you and steal your money and all this stuff, or PayPal with their stable coin? You know, if anyone remembers from the COVID era, PayPal debanked many people. JP Morgan also debanked people. And they, you know, there was no recourse there. So it's not necessarily better to give that kind of control over to a private entity. Okay, so it's not the Fed, but it's JP Morgan and all of these banks that, you know, took your taxpayer money in 2008.
It's people
Right.
even less accountable than the Fed. Now it's going to be it's in the cloud. We don't know who's on
Sure.
the other end.
But if you're familiar, you know, with how the Fed came to be, and it was these entrenched banking dynasties taking control of monetary policy in the United States. What better way? I mean, the Fed, for them, when they did that, it was the middleman between them and the government. But now what we're doing is that we're taking out the middleman with what's happening now. So expect an effort to wealth transfer. And it's not like, I mean, if you think Trump isn't going to facilitate the bankers' designs, I would urge you to investigate some of Trump's history, or what the monetary policy his administration did during COVID, the going direct reset, which was basically fleece everyone that's not in the top few percent of the country. And a lot of people don't even know that happened. But if you're familiar, if you'd like to know more, you can go to Catherine Austin Fitz's Solari report, or look at the work of John Titus on this. It's very well documented and very bad. And it was designed by BlackRock, who used to be Trump's former, Larry Fink used to be Trump's former money manager. And of course, once BlackRock got involved in the Bitcoin ETF business, Bitcoin culture started a slow decline from being anti-state and libertarian to being, we love the government. And we love stable coins, and we love buying U.S. government debt, and all this madness. So, you know, it's very important to develop economic resilience, and we can do that at the local level and stop empowering these people. You know, I think one of the reasons too why, like, Israel invested so much time and money and effort, covert and overt, in challenging the BDS movement, boycott, divest, sanctions. Economic boycotts are powerful, and we can boycott the oligarchs. And if we're spending all of our time on vote for team red and blue and all of that, we're never going to be able to do anything that extricates us from their power. And the more we get pushed into the digital age, the more dependent we become on them for everything. And people need to really seriously think about how we avoid, you know, basically becoming so dependent that we have no choice to basically be little better than slaves to these people at some point.
Harumph. That means I agree. To use our time judiciously, let's go to your new article, which Charlie and I went through. This is something worth bragging about. And my first question is, then I'll go to Charlie because he has questions too. Is Naomi Campbell the one that was married to Adam Clayton from U2? Is U2 involved in this?
I think, well, I didn't find U2 involvement in it, but when I was looking into Naomi Campbell, yeah, I don't know if they actually married, but they were, I think, engaged or in a very serious relationship. But I ended up not really including that in the piece, because I focused more on Briatore, because I find him to be very interesting. Though I did talk about another one of Naomi Campbell's serious relationships, who is like, forget his first name, but like Vlad Doronian or something. I don't know how to pronounce his name. I'm sorry about that. I know how to write it, obviously, but I don't know how to say it. Sorry. But he was basically put on the map by Mark Rich, who was a fugitive from the U.S. for some time, a well-known by now and confirmed Mossad asset, commodities trader, mainly oil trader, that created Glencore, which of course Glencore is now very much controlled by the Rothschild family. So interesting overlap there. Yeah, I didn't find any U2 involvement beyond that relationship Campbell had, but it preceded her involvement with Briatore.
I just asked because I remember your observation that Bono's looking more and more every day like Jimmy Savile. So I didn't know if those lines had crossed yet. It's in a future article, everybody. She'll find out at some point. All right. So you wrote about this Fabio character profusely over here. Flavio
Briatore. Yeah.
His hair's not as good. his
Well,
hair?
he obviously underwent major had like a big makeover a few years ago, and it was talked about in Italian tabloids because the transformation was like very noticeable.
Because
But
he
yeah.
wanted to be Fabio. He thought his name was spelled wrong on the birth certificate. He's wanted to be Fabio his whole life. All right, seriously though,
It's very possible. I don't know,
he's
but
like an Italian businessman who's like Trump. He's got connections to Epstein and Trump. And Naomi Campbell is like the piece you put in there for the glimmer to get people to read the serious, right?
yeah.
Because they know
So
Naomi Campbell, no one knows Flavio.
yeah, of course, and a lot of these people that slide under the radar, aren't known by most people, which is what makes them so interesting. So as I mentioned earlier, of course, the main thesis of my book is about the national crime syndicate merging with intelligence and sort of becoming this power structure. But of course, the National Crime Syndicate, who was that? Well, it was really the Jewish American mob and part of the Italian mafia. And the figure of that ran the Italian mafia component of that was Lucky Luciano. And Lucky Luciano, either during or right after World War II, was deported to Italy and sort of became a point man there for this network that formed during Operation Underworld and continued thereafter. And a lot of that
and it's how
network.
Patton took Sicily to take over for like the invasion. That's
Yeah, it was all
Lucky Luciano.
mixed together,
Yeah,
sure.
yeah.
And so Luciano and that network get involved with the Vatican and the CIA and all this Gladio stuff. And I'm not really an expert on that, so I would refer people to other people that have written extensively about that. But I did mention a group that is important in this nexus in this article and also in my book, which is the Freemasonic Lodge P2, where propaganda do. Which became a major scandal in Italy for basically being a subversive organization. It was labeled as such by the government, and a lot of bank collapses and other things were sort of tied to that. And so we see in Flavio Briatore, and also another person who's going to be covered in this series, that sort of they seem to be part of this power structure that represents in Italy the continuation of P2, and they are sort of all, well, not sort of, they are all very connected to a P2 member, former Prime Minister of Italy, Silvio Berlusconi, who may be best known now for his bungo bungo parties, where he was convicted of hiring an underage prostitute and having weird orgies involving African rituals, among other things. But this is coming from Italian court. I'm not making that up. But Berlusconi not only was involved with P2, he was also many allegations over the years of him having organized crime affiliations. And his long time friend, Flavio Briatore, of course, is the subject of this article. And Briatore has another P2 connection. He actually got his start working for this company called Paramati that used to be owned by Michelle Sindona, who's one of the more notorious figures from P2, because even though he was imprisoned in relation to the scandal, and he was under 24-hour constant police watch to prevent him from being killed, and then he was killed by cyanide-laced coffee. Sounds kind of familiar to other things we've been talking about. So Sindona, his business interests were handed off to various people that, knew Sindona. And one of those people is a man named Attilio Duto, who took over Paramati. And Flavio Briatore was his assistant. That's the first known job Briatore ever had. And then Duto dies in a car bomb, which remains unsolved in the late 70s, and Briatore left town. I found one source that said that Briatore was charged with wrongdoing in relation to Paramati's subsequent collapse, but I couldn't find any evidence he'd actually gone to trial for that. So I'm not sure if that was actually true or not, but either way, working for that company is interesting in and of itself. Becoming very involved with Berlusconi is very strange. He got arrested for fraud in Italy in relation to his ties to organized crime, run illegal gambling dens after he moved to Milan. And then he ends up being a fugitive in the U.S. Virgin Islands for a long time, and basically starts running the U.S. interests of Luciano Benetton of the United Colors of Benetton family, and as their U.S. representative. And then he gets into Formula One racing, which is probably what he's best known for, because the Benettons got into Formula One racing, and he was put, in team and became like the head guy at several prominent teams, particularly the Benetton team in the mid-90s won the Formula One championship back-to-back, and Briatore was credited with that, along with the driver he was coaching, Michael Schumacher, who's was pretty famous for that era. I didn't really know much about Formula One before that, but what's interesting too is that Formula One, at least in Canada and also in the US, has been accused of acting as a hub for human trafficking. And in Canada, it's apparent, in Montreal in particular, it's like a major issue, and girls are told to like stay at home and not go out without an adult when Formula One events come to town. And anyway, why this is also interesting is because, as I note in the article, if you're with how the Epstein Black Book came to be, in the significance of the few names in that book that are circled, that was Epstein's former butler circling material witnesses to Epstein's sex trafficking crimes, as well as and so like Ghislaine Maxwell's name is circled, Jean-Luc Brunel is circled, Leslie Wexner is circled, Alan Dershowitz is circled, Donald Trump is circled, and so is Flavio Briatore. And
are they all still alive, with the exception of two people on that list? Maybe Brunel's dead, right?
Brunel is the only one that's dead. I mean, obviously Epstein's dead, but he's not on the list of his own contact book. But yeah. But no one except for Maxwell and Brunel, out of all the circled names, has ever been investigated or questioned. As far as I know, except maybe some of the softball questioning that reportedly Epstein lawyers like Brad Edwards did of Trump at one point, but that was like Trump volunteering stuff.
Les Wexner is available. Les Wexner is available for questioning because he's building his own city in Ohio right now, right?
Oh, he's been building it. New Albany. Epstein helped him buy the land for that, along with Jack Kessler, that helped pick Jamie Dimon to be the CEO of JP Morgan. And they have a lot of weird things they're building there in New Albany. I hope to write about that soon, because that's a
technocracy
link dump
hive.
Word document that I've had just sitting there for months, while I haven't really been writing as much the past couple of years. So hopefully I'll get something out on that soon. But it's interesting.
Yeah, now's the perfect time for you to find your pace again, because they're cranking out this Epstein saga with tripling and doubling and tripling down on like, oh no, there's nothing else to see here. It's like, I don't know about that. There's too much contextual history that we've all learned in the past 10 years at least, right?
Well, it's interesting that almost every major Silicon Valley oligarch had some sort of Epstein connection, and there's no interest from either side in looking into that, even though they're basically super enmeshed with the Trump administration. But, other tech oligarchs are very enmeshed with the Democratic Party, like Reid Hoffman on the Democrat side, very extensive Epstein relationship. Why is no one asking about that? And then, more information was made public this year about Peter Thiel and Epstein. And there's, Kimball Musk, Elon Musk's brother, dating someone from Epstein's entourage and supposedly getting tours of SpaceX as a result of that relationship. And then Epstein allegedly advising SpaceX and trying to take them private with Saudi money, since Epstein was advising Saudi and Emirati sovereign wealth funds. A lot of strange things that people just don't want to ask questions about as it relates to the case. And I wonder why that might be. So, yeah, I mean, obviously there's a lot of threads on that no one really wants to pick on in big media. And so obviously those are of extreme interest to me. And I think they should be of interest to other people that are interested in digging into sort of this particular network and trying to figure out what he was really doing.
Yeah, I think it's not that difficult if people just change their perspective. For instance, instead of like looking outside of the story, think of, you are military intelligence director of Israel. You're Amon. You got this guy, Robert Maxwell, that works for you. He's putting backdoors into software in the entire U.S. judicial system. And you got Don Barr over in America, who's the American version of Rafi Eitan for Israel. I'm sorry, Bill Barr, the cover-up artist extraordinaire. Because that's what Bill Barr was in the early 80s for Iran-Contra. Like, he was known 50 years ago as a cover-up artist.
One of the Epstein lawyers also was involved in October surprise Iran-Contra stuff, the Stanley Pottinger guy, too.
So if you're a tiny nation state that's always fighting for your survival, wouldn't you want your intelligence directorate to be advising Saudi and Emirati money and getting in the middle of all their money laundering.
Yeah,
and
they
tax
have been
hiding.
for
Yeah.
they have been for a long time though. I mean, what do you think the rise of Mohammed bin Salman, MBS, was
Right.
about? I mean, that was a coup against John Brennan's golden boy, who MBS put under house arrest. And then one of the biggest pictures in Epstein's residence when it was raided is Epstein with MBS. And I personally think that one of the reasons Epstein was taken out during the first Trump administration, I don't necessarily mean just being killed, but also being, you know, being imprisoned and charged and all of that, despite the non-prosecution agreement, is because of this wider feud between Trump world, because I think a lot of the same people behind Trump were the people that Epstein was working for at that time, even though they don't personally like each other at that point. I think the connections are pretty clear there against what I would sort of call, you know, the faction of which John Brennan is part. And that John Brennan was mad, as formerly being CIA station chief, that the network he had worked to build and employ there and set up, you know, was all ready to go. The person he was closest to in Saudi Arabia was going to become king. And then somebody tied to Epstein, that network, comes in and puts in young MBS, and MBS hangs a bunch of Saudi oligarchs upside down in the Ritz-Carlton, and does this crazy shakedown, and then does this charm offensive. And then the Jamal Khashoggi stuff happens kind of inexplicably. People suddenly care about journalists being killed abroad. Very strange. They didn't care as much when, you know, Mike Pompeo and Trump's CIA in the first term tried to kill Julian Assange or send him to prison for being a publisher and journalist. But they did care about Jamal Khashoggi quite a bit. And Jamal Khashoggi has all these, you know, obviously strange connections. Adnan Khashoggi being his uncle, and also being very involved with the Mujahideen in Afghanistan during Operation Cyclone, among other strange connections there. And so, you know, obviously this was an attack on, you know, Trump world. And I think also Russiagate, John Brennan's involvement in that, was also an effort to try and fight back over these kind of machinations that were happening. And I think Epstein was also kind of part of it as well, at the end of the day. I think also the MBS stuff, like when he first came to power and Epstein wasn't in prison, he announced like Sophia the robot was a citizen of Saudi Arabia. I don't know if you guys remember that, but that was built by Epstein-funded scientists. So I think a lot of the Vision 2030 stuff from MBS was very Epstein influenced, because he was very into AI very early, and a lot of stuff we're seeing rolled out now. I mean, the Epstein was bankrolling that from a very early stage.
So
I'm glad
the John Brennan angle, just real quick, just John Brennan is the CIA that was grooming the Saudis, right? John Brennan is the American version of Sinjin Philby, who groomed Ibn Saud in the first place for MI6. So a proxy network, because the British are favorable about using the Saudis for proxy networks for the last 100 years.
Of course. Well, they created Wahhabism.
Right, which was an extremist form. And those were all, they're all backing of Hitler. But the John Brennan aspect, he went native just like Sinjin Philby did. He converted to Islam, pretty sure, like he was pretty tight with their culture. So he was really embedded in it. And then they come by and put MBS in charge, because they're like, Brennan's too invested in this. Look, he's taking on their culture.
And MBS is texting Kushner and Adam Newman of WeWork, and they're solving Middle East peace together. I mean, there were a lot of crazy MBS stories from that time that I think people have kind of forgotten a little bit. He was going to offer to receive Al-Aqsa Mosque, the Dome of the Rock, brick by brick, and reconstruct it in Saudi Arabia so that they could build the third temple in Jerusalem. Interesting. I wonder who might have wanted to have sponsored MBS to come to power.
I don't know. It's a mystery. Let's go to Charlie while I think about that.
I'm glad people are talking about Epstein, about the trafficking component. It's gross and it's important, and they should, but I wish they were talking about the other things as well. His relationship with Martin Nowak at Harvard and evolutionary dynamics. You mentioned the Saudis and Sophia the robot. How about his work with Ben Goertzel and the little Sophia, the 18-inch doll for emotional support for girls that's wired up with cameras and microphones and and geotagging and all of this, like a pedo catalog. If I've ever seen one. There's some things I wish people were more curious about with regard to Epstein, because it's like if you come for the trafficking and stay for the little Sophia and all the AI he's working on, there's just it's a big conspiracy onion.
Yeah. I've tried to tweet about Ben Goertzel a few times and have gotten some people not happy with me because he has teamed up very extensively with Charles Hoskinson, the Ethereum co-founder who now runs Cardano. Cardano was oddly kind of promoted in one of the acts passed last year in Crypto Week. And Hoskinson, I believe, was a pretty significant donor to Trump last cycle. We'll see what happens there, but Epstein helped fund an AI center Goertzel was creating in Ethiopia. And then now Cardano is running digital ID for school children that's mandatory in Ethiopia. Ben Goertzel's gotten really involved with them and no one's really pushed back about his Epstein ties, which I find kind of troubling. I guess they've memory hold them to an extent, but people are still associating with him and a lot of these other scientists that we're funding. We're being funded by Epstein for a reason. We know that Epstein was really into eugenics, transhumanism, using AI to push both of those things forward as much as possible. Also, of course, the use of AI in finance, because a lot of people also overlook Epstein's financial crimes. He was a big currency speculator and trader. So was Peter Thiel, instantly enough, at the very beginning. And a lot of those guys have caused a lot of economic harm and basically can do major damage overnight. I mean, obviously Soros is most notorious for that, but there's other figures that have done that kind of stuff over the years too.
Do you recall where Soros got his origin funding? Do you know that fact?
Yeah, it's I believe it's Edmund de Rothschild banking interests.
Yeah.
Bankrolling him in the early 60s or
1968
something like that.
or 1969 Quantum Fund. Yeah.
That's it. Okay, late 60s then.
Yeah, it's fascinating
London
how they keep
School of
coming up.
Economics.
That's all. Go ahead, Charlie.
I said London School of Economics contacts.
Yes. Yeah, and Sir Evelyn de Rothschild and Lynn Forrester de Rothschild or up with
Peter
Epstein.
Soros, who's George Soros's nephew, was another circled name in the Black Book, and that has been sort of ignored. And he was running the Soros London office, which, I believe a certain Scott Bessent was working at for a very long time.
Oh. Too many coincidences. That's the problem.
Well, it's just, again, you pull on one thread, it becomes very quickly convenient for both sides.
Red team, blue team is taking a hit with this whole story. They want to put it under the rug for sure.
Well, not even that. It's just such a crazy testament to how socially engineered people on both sides can be. The right for years screamed about George Soros anything, and then like a long-term, multi-decade George Soros flunky is our Treasury Secretary, and they're like, he's based in a patriot. Okay, that's fine. But how are people so easily like shedding views they've had for decades in like 5 minutes? I mean, it's crazy. The engineering that happens through social media and mass media has been really extensive. And now it's not happening in mainstream media anymore. It's happening on social media. It's happening on podcasts, but the big time podcasts that get a lot of views. That's why Trump and JD Vance were going on Tim Dillon and Theo Vaughn and all of these platforms, Joe Rogan. They're not really granting the same that's what matters to them now. And then you have podcasters like Dan Bongino or whatever being deputy director and, news host of Fox and Friends running the Pentagon. Those people have built trust with Trump's base. And so they're the public face of these things, but who's actually making the decisions? I would argue it's the people behind them. Like Steve Feinberg of Cerberus Capital Management is deputy Pentagon secretary. He used to own, I think he still owns, DynCorp. So the guy that owns DynCorp
last week.
We just talked
tied
about
up
that.
with child sex trafficking and all sorts of terrible things. He's the deputy secretary, but look at Hegseth. Look at the Fox and Friends hosts that you
Cerberus
trust.
guards the gates to hell. So that's what the Pentagon is, right? It's a big pentagram over there. So they got the symbology right. Well, don't be worried about it. Look, you got to see things from Cash's perspective. First, cross your eyes. No, I'm kidding. I'm kidding. I shouldn't do that. But Andrew Schultz called him cockeyed Cash, and I laughed at that. So I'm going to stop laughing at that. That's not right. However, on a serious side, Kash Patel did not remember that you can't kill yourself in that inmate palace that they have in New York, the correctional facility with the shoe.
Inmate
He didn't remember
palace.
that until they told him, because he said that he has, look, he's like, I've been in these jails, I know how the things work. He killed himself. Well, you didn't remember that a couple months ago when you were like talking about this being a big conspiracy. So he suddenly remembered his experience, and there's nothing to see there. It's totally believable, and I'm not
Nothing
feeling
to see
gaslit at
there.
all. Not feeling gaslit at all.
Yeah,
by that.
well, I mean, RFK Jr. was once against mRNA vaccines, and those seem to keep getting approved under him. I wonder if it has to do with the Deputy Secretary, Jim O'Neill, who is a longtime flunky of Peter Thiel, who's really into transhumanist medicine.
It's all Team America.
It's
only
fine.
Instead of DARPA, Muhammad Jihad, it's like DARPA.
Yeah, well, Jim O'Neill was actually hired by a company not long before he was named Deputy Health Secretary. That is about they want to inject aluminum into Alzheimer patients because they think it will cure them somehow.
Depends on what cure means. If you mean kill them, or...
Kennedy, who says aluminum leads to neurotoxicity when it's injected into you, and then Jim O'Neill is like, let's inject aluminum into Alzheimer's patients for money. That doesn't seem compatible to me, but one of those two people was on the Epstein flight logs. So
yeah, maybe we need better options. I think free psilocybin for all the elderly. Let them try that instead of aluminum. It's probably better for them.
Probably better.
World could be a better place. Maybe
but
overnight.
Hey, you remember after COVID though, what the theme of the WEF was? It was rebuilding trust.
Oh yes.
Right. How do we rebuild trust with the public now that we've hemorrhaged it during COVID? And so all these people that Americans and Trump's base started to trust during COVID, they kind of got put in the government, and now they're like switching around, but people are like, this can't really be you. What's going on here? I hope
it's
people
just part of
catch
building
on.
back better.
Well, the WEF, I know a lot of people framed it as quote unquote communist, but it's really all about the public-private partnership, which is really more like fascism, I guess. But we've gone from the WEF being all into the governments, the public sector. They can move very easily into the private sector and still accomplish their same agendas, but through different vectors, right?
Look,
and so
Whitney's right. Here's a fact check. World Economic Forum. This is the giant coffee table book by Klaus Schwab, Building an International Institution for Public-Private Cooperation. And all the people you've ever seen on TV, they're all in here. All these people, they're in on that agenda. So yeah, it's not just international communism. It's also technocracy and a whole bunch of other stuff that they've wrapped up into the guise of non-local accountability, AKA slavery.
Well, it's, quote unquote communist China working with quote unquote capitalist Israel and the United States and whatever. I mean, there's a lot of overlap there, between economically at the end of the day. There's a really important quote that I would urge people to consider from Samuel Pisar, who is Robert Maxwell's close confidant and lawyer. But this was back in the early 70s when he was running this thing called like the U.S. I forget what it was called now, but it was about like bridging East and West for the purpose of commerce. And he was talking about how the nation state, he told Congress, the nation state is pretty much, or I'm paraphrasing, obviously, the nation state is irrelevant now because state-owned companies in China and Russia are doing joint ventures with multinational corporations based in the United States and the West. And together they are forming an economic structure that makes the nation state irrelevant. That's basically what he said.
Called a new world order.
In the early pretty much, right? But I mean, he's told Congress in the early 70s, and Samuel Pisar was part of the same group behind Epstein. I mean, he was an operator in that too, absolutely. And he helped advised Steve Jobs, and Steve Jobs, referring to him, said he didn't know whether he worked for the KGB or the CIA, but maybe he was working for both guys. Robert Maxwell also had a lot of ties to Russian Soviet era intelligence. So,
and MI6 and KGB had a long, strong relationship. Kim Philby was part of that bridge. He went native and went and lived in Russia, right? And his dad had done the same thing. So there's like a whole pattern of repeating there. But I just wanted to give you a quick pop quiz before we let you go with your busy day.
Oh, man.
Samuel Pisar has a famous stepson. Who might that be? Oh, I thought it was Anthony Blinken.
Oh,
did
duh.
I
Yeah,
get it
sorry.
wrong? Oh, I got
No,
it right.
you're right.
Okay.
That
All
was
right,
his
cool.
stepson. Yeah.
Right.
Sorry for blanking on that. I'm
That's all
very
right.
sleep deprived.
Don't
Since
be
I
blanking on blinking.
No, I shouldn't be. Well, I mean, the news cycle is so crazy and so fast. It seems like the Biden administration happened like 6 years ago.
Right.
We're not even a year through Trump round 2, and so much has happened. It feels like it's been ages. Because there's these crazy huge stories, and then the next thing happens, and it's just like, wait, what? I mean, it's really like crazy hyper normalization time to such an extreme extent, that I think we're just becoming desensitized to scandal. Like in the US, people were desensitized to war crimes and atrocity during the War on Terror era. And now it's just like those things don't even blip for most Americans. And now I guess they're trying to desensitize us to pedophiles in government, and just also constant like crazy stories, just like nothing registers anymore. We're just like on to the next thing. Attention span of mosquitoes. And now we have to rely on AI to tell us what to think, right?
Or what's real.
This is actually what Eric Schmidt and Henry Kissinger predicted would happen in their book on AI, which I encourage everyone to read, because it basically was like, everyone will become too stupid to use AI, the masses will, and there will be a two-tier society. There will be the people who program AI and decide its objective function, and then the people that AI acts upon that lose the cognitive ability to understand what is happening to them.
Yeah,
so be careful about how you ingest media, guys.
They got like the business plan for our reality based on Elysium right here. That's what they did.
People should read it. It's a very quiet part out loud book about what's going on right now, and people should read it, especially if you know what kind of person Kissinger was, because they frame a lot of it, as warnings. We're worried this could happen. Do you think Kissinger is actually worried about that if you know about anything about him?
Well, he's dead now,
not.
so.
Yeah, I guess so. It's fine. I mean, that's what Bill Gates said about Epstein, right? He's dead now.
Well, he's dead. So, in general, you always have to be careful.
Hey, next time, next time we want to talk about Jabotinsky. But before we let you go, Charlie, do you have any wrap-up questions for Whitney?
No, I think everybody needs to go read her newest article, First Friends, because, from P2 to F1. No idea.
Oh, that's good. I want to use that.
That's
Thanks.
marketing right there.
Actually, the last 2 installments of the series are much worse than this one. This is just kind of the appetizer. I think the other 2 are really bad in the implications. I think the last one's probably the worst. But we may have that be an exclusive to the upcoming Unlimited Hangout print magazine that we're hoping to have out at some point this year, and hopefully do somewhat regularly over the next several years, for the same thing I was just talking about with the impact of AI on us and how it's shaping our reality. Because ultimately in that Kissinger Schmidt book, they say the power of AI is that it will basically warp our ability to perceive reality. And if you alter someone's perception, you alter their behavior, right? So it's very important that we fight against that. And so a lot of, I think, the efforts to sort of wear us down and make us susceptible to this cognitive decline and all of that is to have us not think for ourselves, not read for ourselves, not investigate for ourselves. And eventually we stop thinking for ourselves pretty much entirely and have this thing think for us. So, there was this slow food movement when people were reporting about how dangerous fast food is for you. I think that's true with content too. Fast content is AI slop. You probably shouldn't be consuming it. It's probably not good for your brain. So I would encourage everyone to invest your time, and if you're a content creator, to, start working to produce slow content that is, original and not, because we're so incentivized by the algorithm and we need the clicks and all of this stuff, the metrics and all of that. We need to move away from that if we want to fight this stuff and the New World Order and all of that. We should really focus on slow content, so that, we're trying to get more into physical media too, and, focus on long form journalism, which there's not a lot of that happening right now, period, whether you're talking like mainstream or independent. it's a lot of the focus is on fast content and just talking about headlines from mainstream media, not really doing deep dives. So we're going to be focusing on that and hope to have, a print magazine out. And we hope other people will join us, trying to help urge people herd people back into the real world a little bit and out of this digital corral that's being made for us. I think it's really important. So people can look for that and follow we're not going to paywall anything that's in the magazine either, so it'll all be on unlimitedhangout.com, as well as will other articles that we put out aside from the magazine, which we'll continue to be doing.
You can read all about it. First Friends, How Italy's Donald Trump Introduced Naomi Campbell to Jeffrey Epstein is part 1 in the series, and you're going to need to read this part to get to the other juicy parts. You can find it on unlimitedhangout.com. Whitney, thank you for taking time out of your busy schedule. This was fun, and I look forward to getting on your calendar again to do it a little bit more in depth with Jabotinsky next time.
Yeah, I would love that. Thanks, Richard. My pleasure to be here.
All right. I've dealt with a variety of fears over the years by facilitating a growth mindset and an anti-fragile mentality. I've learned from mistakes that you haven't even conceived of yet. Now, I can't do it for you, but I can share the resources, the methods, the tools, and inspiration for you to learn how to do it for yourself. And it really is worth learning how to do for yourself because it's a lifelong beneficial skill. It's evergreen. It's never going to tarnish. You're always going to use this. If you're interested in learning more, I host a podcast every Sunday night. We analyze the week's news and help you have non-contradictory views you actually understand, but you've got to come along for the ride and process the news with us so you have that understanding. I also teach adults twice a year in a 12-week course called Autonomy that is aimed at resolving all the problems I just pointed out with the school system and the irrational fears and the replacement of the rites of passage and the methods you need to have a skeleton key in life and a Swiss Army knife so you can have the tools and the access to do whatever you need to do in this world to bring your goals, to bring your dreams and map them to a truthful reality. It is a simple process, but it is not for those who cling to their irrational fears. So I hope if we have lowered the barrier to entry today, if you see a future you that is more realistic and in detail and something you want to strive toward, I recommend you go to getautonomy.info. Check out the offer as far as what we do for people. I want you to know it applies to you. You can learn it. I can teach it. So I want to thank you all for your time and attention. Peace. Who's going to be first off the mute this morning?
I'm glad that I have this course now more than ever. Having a community of people to discuss how to be empowered and autonomous is really necessary and also therapeutic. I'm this much scared about the virus and a lot scared of what's coming down the pipe as a result.
All right, so first off, we're going to get you away from that fear and that stress that I'm sensing. And I want to get you into the practicality of exercising the conversations you're going to need to have.
Have you found that your skills aren't matching up with the challenges ahead? Here are 19 essential skills for success that school never taught you. Get your free copy by following the link below or visit getautonomy.info/19skills.